Hello everyone, I'm How To Bob, and I made this video to show you how to change the clutch in a 2005 Honda VTX 1800R. I chose the MTC clutch. It came highly recommended on a lot of forums. So I'm going to start out with the fiber rings and put them in a shallow pan, pour some oil in it and let them soak overnight or at least a few hours worth to get them good and oil coated. I want to make sure I shake it up and get a lot of oil all over each and every fiber clutch ring here. So once I get that started, I'm going to go over to my bike, and the exhaust bolts are usually rusted and a little difficult to get off, so I'm going to put some penetrating oil on the 4 exhaust bolts that I'll need to remove before installing my clutch. And again, I'll do this typically the night before or a few hours, let the penetrating oil do its job. Now to start out, I've got the front wheel up a couple inches higher than the other wheel. That allows the bike to lean a little further to the side so none of the oil spills out. And I'm going to start taking out the exhaust bolts here. Once I get those 2 out, I can move to the other 2 exhaust bolts. Now sometimes the nut will come off like this, and sometimes the whole stud will come out depending on what is tight or loose, which one is tighter. And the reason I want to lean my bike further to the left, it's still on the kickstand, that way none of the oil spills out of the crankcase. I did not drain my oil out, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'll do an oil change a couple hundred miles after I change my clutch. That gives it a chance to wear in any parts, that rough edges, any debris, anything that's in there will work its way through it, and I'll change it about 100, 200 miles. Now you can see this one came out, the stud came out of this one, no big deal. I just have to remember which one it came from. But the oil will flush that stuff out in the future, and I can change it then. I've got my 2 bolts at the bottom that I need to remove of the exhaust. All the work on this job will be done on the right hand side of the bike, and once I get those loose, the exhaust will be free hanging. So this is a good time to get some help if you have some available. You can take the bag off if you have a bag to make it easier. I think I can work this one out from underneath the footboards here, the floorboards, with a little help. Careful not to scratch the bags. You can see there's a O-ring in here, a crushed gasket, if you will. It's made out of copper. Just got to reach in there and pull it out. It's flat at this point. I've got new ones that I'm going to use to replace this, and I'll put those in at the end here. And you can see this one's flat, crushed also. So next I'm going to remove all the bolts on the large cover. Once I get those out, I'll show you what there's a little rubber gasket around each bolt. You can see it right on the edge there. I just slide that out, and there's little rubber bumpers, so you got to be careful that they don't fall off. You can see they just push into place, so some of them may fall out. That keeps the vibrations down. I want to make sure to find all of those, put them back in, and save those for reassembly. Now you can see there's a little tab right here, and that is to help you line up the cover for reassembly. So next I'm going to remove the front cover, and all these bolts so far have been the same size. This one just pulls straight off. There's no rubber bushings or anything on this. After I get the front cover off, I'm going to remove all the bolts around the right crankcase. Right now I just loosen them up, and then I can go through and take them all the way out. Now these are all different sizes, so you want to make a cardboard template like this, and what I did is just push the bolts through the cardboard template as I took them out. You can see they're a little different size as you take them out. Each one's a little different size. That one's a little bit longer. It just makes it easier when reassembling to get them back where they go. So I've got a block of wood, and I'm going to go to the opposite side of the bike, and there's a little edge here of the case. I can lightly tap that out, and my case will come loose, and I just rock it back and forth, pull my right crankcase off, and you'll see little strings of gasket material here. And I'm going to see it's pretty clean in there actually, and none of the oil has spilled out. So I've got my bike tipped to the left enough. So I'm going to begin removing the clutch spring bolts here, and I'm going to loosen each one in a cross pattern just to get it started. Once I get them loose, I can go ahead and remove each one. And you can see there's a spring in there and just the clutch spring bolt. And I grab my drill, make it a little quicker here for removal at least. And then I can remove my pressure plate. And there's also a release rod there. Keep that in place. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my drive plate out and all of my fiber rings and steel rings. I've got a little hooked pick here that helps get the ones out a little deeper in the basket. Once I get all those out, you can see it's a little burnt here from slipping. Springs were a little weak, and you can see down here there's a little bit of discoloration. So what I do is take the steel plates, I'm going to reuse those, so I'll take some sandpaper and scuff it up. Go in a random pattern. You don't want to go in a circular motion all the time. Go back and forth. You want a cross pattern on it, and make sure all the discoloration is off of the plates, and they'll be good to go again. Once I get this all sanded down, redo it on all of the steel plates, and that's looking pretty good. Once I get them all sanded down, I'll get a parts cleaner, brake cleaner, and I'll clean off all the grit from the sandpaper and set that aside for reassembly. Get all those done. Then I can begin the reassembly. I'm going to start with my fiber ring here, my fiber plate, and that slides right in. And I alternate with the steel plate that I've already sanded. I'm going to put a little oil, rub a little bit of the oil from the fiber pan on the steel ring just to make sure that it's well coated. It'll get coated once the engine starts running, but I want to make sure that I don't fire it up dry, just a little precaution. So I will alternate back and forth between the fiber ring and the steel ring until I get to the very last one. And you'll see that that one goes one notch off, just one to the left, and it slides right in place. So now I'm ready to put my pressure plate on, but I want to make sure that I have my release rod in. I put that in, and this MTC clutch came with these little spacers, or shims if you will, and I'm going to go ahead and put those in. I'm going to put 2 in. You can put more in, or you can put less in if you have this clutch. If you don't have this clutch, there probably won't be any of these shims, so don't worry about that part. And I'll put my springs in, and I'm going to hand screw in the clutch spring bolts to begin with, just to make sure that I don't cross thread anything. And I'm going in a cross pattern so that the pressure plate will go down evenly. Once I get it snugged up, I'll get my torque wrench, and I want to tighten that to 9 foot-pounds. And I do it in a cross pattern. And I want to make sure each one gets 9 foot-pounds. Once I get all my clutch spring bolts tightened up, I'm going to take my right crankcase cover and clean it up real well with some parts cleaner. You can get some gasket remover and go around the edges and get all the old gasket material off. You can use a razor blade carefully, make sure not to scrape or scratch the edge of the crankcase, and you want to be real careful on this area here because the edges can be very, very sharp. And I'm going to use some Honda Bond, and I've got the gray Honda Bond. I'm putting a bead of it around the crankcase here. I use the gray because if any of it shows, you won't see it. It'll match the crankcase and the engine block. Once I get a bead around there, take my finger and carefully make sure that it's wiped around evenly, and I want to get the excess that goes on the inside out because that will go into the engine. So I'm going to go around the inside very carefully, and then I'm going to put a small bead also on the bike itself. Go around the whole area, and again working the bead to make sure that it's flat and even. Don't want to get too much, but I do want to make sure that it's all coated very well because this is the only thing that seals that crankcase in. There's not a gasket that goes in here, and I want to make sure the inside is all clean. Then I can take my crank case and slide it into place. Slides right in, and begin putting my crankcase bolts in. Took them off my cardboard, and I'm just going to put them in by hand right now. Get all of them hand tightened, go all the way around the crankcase. Once I get those tightened up by hand, I'll bring my torque wrench over and tighten these down to 19 foot-pounds, and I'll go around at random areas making sure that I hit each bolt and get them all cranked down to 19 foot-pounds of torque. Alright, I've got them all cranked down to 19. Put my front cover on, and that just gets snugged up. And this little rubber vibration plate here, make sure all these little bumpers are in all the way around. Looks good. So I can put my rear cover in, making sure all those little rubber bumpers are in there. We don't want any rattles. And then I can tighten my rear cover plate. Once I get that tightened up, I'm going to put the exhaust in. And I've got a new copper crush gasket here for the front and the back. And then with a little help, I'm going to put the exhaust back into place. And you can see it's a little difficult to line up and get into place, so it does definitely help having another set of hands to help hold the back end. I'm going to start by putting the bottom bolts in the exhaust, the lower bolts, and that leaves the front two exhaust bolts. Once I get those tightened down by hand, I'm going to bring the torque wrench back over and tighten those down to 17 foot-pounds. And once I run the bike for a while, I like to come back out and re-torque them down because those crush gaskets can loosen up a little bit. Doesn't hurt just to throw the torque wrench back on there. Once I get both pipes tightened down, that's all there is to it. We're ready to ride. So this is how you change the clutch on a 2005 Honda VTX 1800R. If you like this video, please subscribe and hit the like button. I'm How To Bob. Thanks for watching.